Hey guys, welcome to my option contract explanation video here. Just before we get started, I have an important disclaimer I got to read off because I am not attorney and I am not allowed to give a legal advice. So, this form is provided as is without any warranty of any kind, express or implied, statutory or otherwise. And use of this form is at your own risk. While the information contained herein is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered, it is offered with the understanding that the presenters are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional service. If legal advice or other expert advice is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought out. That being said, let's get over here to the good stuff. Like I said, this is the option to purchase a real estate agreement. I use this contract in my business, my wholesaling business, pretty much every day. We use this contract to tie up properties in a good sense. We're not tying up the seller's properties for long periods of time. It's always created as a win-win situation for everybody. So we have to have this contract in place and signed in order to legally show the property to our end buyers and investors. The reason this is because unless you're a licensed realtor, you cannot market or show a property to any other person, buyer, investor, whatever it may be, without having some kind of equitable interest in a property. This contract here gives you that equitable interest because it is an option contract. It does give you the option to purchase the property. So once you get this signed, you will have that interest and you will legally be able to show the property to your end buyers. I guess the only other thing I can say about this is that it is a unilateral agreement, which means that the seller is obligated to sell you the property, whereas you only have the option to buy it. This is a very low risk strategy and contract because you are not binded to buy this property in any specific type of way. You just have the option to purchase it, but the seller is liable to sell you the house if you decide to exercise your option. Okay, let's go on here. We'll do this line item by line item. This option agreement is made between the following parties. Right here would be the seller's name or the seller's names. Here I have to refer to as the optioner. The seller is always the optioner, and your name or company name would go right here on the second line, which and the his, her, their assignee is already in there, so this contract is assignable, referred to as the optionee. Okay, the following terms are applicable to this agreement. Number one, the optioner agrees to grant an option to purchase to the optionee the land improvements known as. This is where you would put the full address of the property. It would be address, city, state, and zip. And if you also wanted to put the tax ID or parcel number in there, that would only give you a little extra coverage. Optioner agrees that he/she will not attempt to enter into any other negotiations or terms for sale of this property with any other party while this agreement is in effect. If optioner receives any other independent offers on this property, optionee shall be notified immediately. Basically what this is saying is that you have full rights to buy this property within your option term, and the seller can only sell to you. If he gets any other offers, he has to come to you first because you have the legal right to buy this property before anybody else. Now there's another thing. Now technically if the seller goes and finds another buyer, this contract is legally binding and enforceable, but obviously you have to sue the seller in order to prevent him from selling it to somebody else, unless you actually take this contract down to the courthouse and record what's called a memorandum of option. We explain that all in our program, Broke Riches. But basically you'll go to the courthouse, file your memorandum of option, and that will put a cloud on the title for your option period. So basically if the seller would try to go behind your back and sell it to another buyer, that would not be possible because when the title search is run, the title company will inform the seller that you have an equitable interest in this property. They cannot sell this property to another buyer without going through you first, since you filed this option with the courthouse. So if you ever wanted to give yourself full protection, you could actually file a memorandum of option, and that would give you full protection of the property. I myself, unless it's like a slam dunk deal, I never do this. Most of the time I don't think my buyer would ever try and go around me. I mean, I build relationships with my buyers, so there's full trust there, and they would never try and kind of screw me out of a deal, because then they won't get any more deals from me in the future, and that's paying a $5,000 fee to me now and getting a lot more deals down the road is a lot more worth it to them than to try and screw me out of any money on just one in particular deal. So moving along here, we have number 3, which is upon agreement the option would begin on the date of blank and end on the date of blank. So this would just be the date you sign this contract would go here. And then this would be the date that your contract would expire, or your option period would expire. Now, my suggestion is to usually try and do 30 days. You don't want to go tying up a seller's property for a long period of time, like 2-3 months. You just don't want to. You're trying to make this a win-win situation for everybody, so you don't want to, just tie up their property and never do nothing with it. 30 days should usually be sufficient. I mean, my mentor usually told me, if it's a deal, you'll have it sold in 7 days. Anything that lasts longer than that, it's probably not a deal. So try and give yourself 30 days. It's always negotiable with the seller. Sometimes they might only give you like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Just try and get what you can get and put in the end date there. So just say, for instance, if it was January 1st when you sign this contract, you'd put January 1st, 2011 right there. And then your ending date would be February 1st, 2011. So that would give you 30 days. The purchase price will be blank, so you just fill this in basically like you would on a check. So if it was $20,000, you would just put $20,000 and then put the digits right here. Payable by certified funds and settlement. Number 5, optioner grants optionee access to the above property for showing to prospective buyers, contractors, or appraisers. This is a very important line item right here because it's basically telling the seller that you have to have access to show that property to what's basically going to be your end buyer or your investors to see if it's something that they would be interested in. Just a little tip also, if the property is vacant, you definitely want to try and get a lockbox on the house. I mean, you can basically just tell the seller, listen, I have to bring my partners and my contractors through here to make sure this deal is going to work for us. If you could just do me a favor, let me throw a lockbox on there. I'll give you the combination as well. That way you don't have to run out here every time we need to get into the property. It'll save you time, it'll save us time, and we can get this through a lot more smoothly. If the property is not vacant, unfortunately, you will have to go through the seller every time you need to show the house, though. Number 6, optioner must maintain proper insurance on the before mentioned property. That's pretty much self-explanatory. Number 7, if the optionee purchases the property, the optionee will pay all closing costs. That's basically saying that you or your end buyer will be paying all closing costs on this deal. The reason you want to structure your deals like this is because you want the seller to get a net price, basically meaning if you decide or if you settle on a purchase price of $20,000, you want him to get $20,000 at closing, pending any liens or judgments against the property, because you don't want there to be any disputes or problems at closing that any extra fees or anything arise. Just tell him he's going to get that price at closing. Your buyer's getting such a great deal that they should not be complaining about paying any closing costs or paying all the closing costs. So you always want to make sure that the seller is getting the net price and doesn't have to pay any closing costs. Unless, of course, there's a lien or a judgment, then that's something you might have to negotiate with the seller to take care of. Number 8, optioner grants the option for this consideration of $10 for the consideration of $10 and other valuable consideration. This is giving you your right and your option to buy this property within the time frame that you put right here. You have to do some kind of equitable exchange in order to make a contract legally binding. So in this case, we just put $10. And the way we explain to the seller is we say, hey, listen, we have to give you $10 to make our contract legal. Now, with that being said, do as I say, not as I do. I don't actually give the sellers $10. I rarely ever do this. We're just putting so many properties under an option contract that I'd be writing checks left and right for $10, and I'd probably get confused as to where all my checks are going anyway. But unless it's like a slam dunk deal and you're going to file it at the courthouse, or if the seller requests the $10, a lot of times they don't even care. If they request it, then you definitely have to give them the $10. But most of the time they don't even care. They don't even pay attention to that. You can just have them sign it, and there shouldn't be a problem. But if you are a nervous Nancy and you want to make sure that everything's on the up and up and legit, just give them the $10. I mean, it's only a $10 deposit. It's basically a way of making $5,000 with just a $10 deposit. So that'll be completely up to you. Like I said, in order for it to be legally binding, you do have to give some type of consideration of dollar amount, which would be $10. If you want to just change that to $1, you can do that too. I mean, it's pretty much up to you. Most title companies, I'm pretty sure, want to see at least $10 there, but I'm sure you can get away with $1. I mean, it doesn't really matter. And then when all that's said and done and filled out, you basically come down here. Optionee would be you or your company. You just sign right there and date, and make sure you fill in your phone, email, and fax, because you're going to make a copy of this and give it to the seller so he can contact you if there's any problems. Optionee is the seller, so he would sign on that line, put the date, and put his information so that you can have, so in case you have to contact him for anything. That pretty much just wraps up this contract. It's very simple. It's a one-page little agreement that gives you an interest in the property so that you can show it to your investors and end buyers and try to make a deal work. Now, you can actually assign this contract to your end buyer for a fee. Basically, they get paid, that will get paid at closing. In order to do that now, or if you go that route, basically the seller and your end buyer would have to draw up another contract, which would be a purchase agreement, a real estate purchase agreement that doesn't have any option. It would be a strict purchase agreement where the buyer has to buy the property, such as subject to any inspections or any clauses he would put into the contract. Usually what I like to do is get a property under an option, and then once I find an end buyer, I don't actually sign the option contract. I will draw up another contract with the seller once I know I have a buyer in place with the same terms that the buyer is looking for, and then I will sign the actual agreement. That way I can kind of control the sale a little bit more and protect both my buyer and the seller's interests, and kind of stay in the middle to make sure that I get paid in the process. If you have any questions about this, feel free to go to my website at www.theflipkid.com. I'll be definitely answer any questions you guys might have, and I wish you guys luck in your real estate.